Eric, I'm going to be on the phone today, so I apologize for that, but be here listening in. So.
No worries. Glad you're able to join us. Wish we could see your smile, but we'll take your voice.
Well, no, I've got a smile on my face, so know that.
Perfect.
Danielle, I've heard from all of my panelists. Erica and Brian will be on at 1, and Monica's wrapping up a call. So she should be on by 1:20.
Okay, sounds great.
Minerva, you may want to change your name so people know who you are.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Nate. Hi, everybody.
Hey, John.
Hey, John.
Hey, everyone. This is Nate McGrath with the Alliance to End Hunger. Thank you all for joining. I think we're going to give it a couple more minutes for people to filter in. It looks like quite a few people are coming in. So let's just give it a couple more minutes and wait for them. Next time I'll figure out how to get music going at the same time. We're gonna give it a couple more minutes. I still see a lot of people filtering in, so thank you all for your patience.
I can beatbox if you like.
Welcome, everyone. I am Dave Miner. I am pleased to serve as your board chair for the Alliance to End Hunger. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. We sit at a very interesting moment in history. Hunger advocates have had to play defense most of the time for the last 10 years. And it seems like maybe we're at a point where, although hunger is twice as bad, maybe we're at a point where we can really make a difference for the hungry people we care about. And especially through this unique and wonderful collaboration called the Alliance to End Hunger. So thank you for being part of this. And let me turn it over to Eric Mitchell.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate the introduction and welcome everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Eric Mitchell. I am the Executive Director for the Alliance to End Hunger, and I want to welcome you to our annual spring member meeting. As Dave mentioned, we have had a very busy 2021 so far. As many of you know, the President will be signing the American Rescue Plan Act today. And this bill will go a long way in addressing hunger and malnutrition, not only for people in our communities here in the United States, but abroad. And the Alliance played a major part in helping to ensure that our voices were heard and ensuring that food insecurity and hunger was a major priority in these COVID conversations. Because of your support, we were able to put together a letter featuring major corporate partners, faith-based institutions, and anti-hunger groups, pushing for specific policies related to protecting and expanding our domestic nutrition programs. And we also reached out to our congressional leaders in support of our international food assistance programs. And many of our priorities were included in this final package. So I want to thank you all for your support and all that you're doing to help create the political will to end hunger. We have a very packed agenda for you today. But before we go into our program, I want to first go over a couple of housekeeping items. We have a very large attendance for a meeting like this, being as virtual. So we ask that you please do your best to keep yourselves muted. Further, we have a couple of panels today, and you're going to learn a lot, both on domestic hunger space, as well as the international hunger space. And this will work best if you keep your videos off during these panel discussions, so that way you can focus in on our presenters and the questions that will be asked. This meeting is being recorded today and is also being live cast on YouTube. So you'll have a chance to go back and look at the panel discussions, as well as our featured guest speaker, which will be Congressman Jim McGovern, who was a major hunger champion on the Hill for us, and he will join us later in the afternoon. I'd now like to turn it over to Danielle Hattie, who's our Senior Manager of Membership Engagement and Partnerships, as she introduces our newest members of the Alliance. So Danielle, turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Eric, and welcome to everybody. I'm so happy to see that so many of our friends could join us today, so many of our members. I wish we could be doing this in person, but it's great to see everyone, and hopefully by our next meeting, we'll be able to go back to doing things in person and having our usual get together. So this, as everyone knows, is my favorite part of the meeting. I get to introduce our new members. Since our last annual meeting in November, we have had 5 new members join us. So I'm going to read in order. I believe all have representatives with us today. I'll introduce them one by one, and they can share just a brief minute or two about their work. So first, I'd like to start off with the news that Mazone has rejoined the Alliance. We're very excited. Josh Protas, who many of you know, the VP of Public Policy at Mazone, has joined us today, and Mazone has rejoined in the general membership category. So Josh, at this point, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Danielle, and so nice to see so many friendly faces out there. Really glad to have Mazone back at the Alliance. As many of you know, Mazone brings the American Jewish community voice to anti-hunger policy issues. We operate from the understanding that we'll never food bank our way to an end of hunger. That charity alone cannot solve the problem of hunger in this country or across the world, that we need to have robust and strong public programs. In Jewish tradition, we're commanded to set aside the corners of our fields for the poor, the widow, the orphan, the stranger. This is common across all faith traditions. And we're not all farmers anymore, so we don't all have those fields that we can set aside the corners of. Programs like SNAP are the corners of our field. Programs like SNAP fulfill that collective responsibility to take care of the most vulnerable. And we're pleased to be pushing, instead of a charitable reaction to the crisis of hunger, to push for a justice-centered response. And a justice-centered response is all about the advocacy for programs like SNAP. So glad to be working with all of you. Many of you know that Mazone has focused a lot of work and energy on special populations whose needs have long been under-recognized, including military families, where we've been leading the national effort to remove some barriers to access for assistance, veterans, LGBTQ seniors. We're doing work on single mothers and in Indian country. So look forward to the opportunity to work with all of you. Want to just give a special shout out to Minerva and to Eric and to the Alliance for being such great colleagues and partners. I know there was a recent meeting around where military hunger issues came up and you made the connection, and it means so much to have great colleagues who do that and make those connections, and glad to be back at the table.
Thank you so much, Josh. We're so glad to have Mazone back at the table. So next, I'd like to turn it over to Brian Dittmeyer, who is the Senior Public Policy Counsel with the National WIC Association, who has joined under our general membership category.
Thank you, Danielle. And it's hard to follow such eloquent words from Josh, but thank you so much for having us in the Alliance. It's great to be here. I would also like to echo the special shout out for Eric, Minerva, and the Alliance staff. I think they've done an incredible job of really leading the anti-hunger and nutrition communities through the COVID-19 crisis, providing regular points of contact for us to all coordinate and be on the same page as we navigated through this unprecedented crisis. So my name is Brian Dittmeyer. I'm the Senior Public Policy Counsel at the National WIC Association. We are the nonprofit membership organization for WIC providers across the country. That's the Women, Infants, and Children's Program. And this is talk about a special population. This is the opportunity to shape nutrition and food access outcomes for families at the very start of life and setting up the stage for health outcomes long into the future. WIC has been around since 1974, but it's going through a period of significant change right now, particularly accelerated by COVID-19 as in-person clinical services are being redirected to telehealth services, and that there are opportunities to expand the value of the WIC benefit and the types of foods that are provided, including a significant effort over the last 10 years to integrate fruits, vegetables, and whole grains into the WIC benefit. And so a lot of opportunity to ensure that pregnant women, that babies, and that young children have access to food and access to quality, nutritious food that may often be more expensive and out of reach for low-income families. Looking forward to working with all of you in the weeks, months, and years ahead. Lots of opportunity.
Thank you so much, Brian, and welcome. So next, I'd like to turn it over to Cassidy Pont, who is the Federal Government Relations Lead representing child nutrition for Save the Children.
Thank you, Danielle. So Save the Children is a global nonprofit organization who works in over 100 countries to really do whatever it takes to ensure that every child has the right to grow up healthy, educated, and safe, not only every day, but also in the times of crisis. In 2019 alone, we reached over 144 million children globally, including 328,000 here in the US. Our US programs provide support to the most isolated and underserved children in rural America, including programs such as Farmers to Families food boxes, different home deliveries, backpack meals, double dollar incentive programs, pop-up pantries, and much more. We also have an advocacy arm with staff on the ground in 11 states and a significant volunteer and advocacy network across the country, including an email listserv of just under 400,000 Americans. Now, we do have an international portion to this advocacy, and so I'll pass it over to my colleague, Mary, who's on as well.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Cassidy. My name is Mary Laurie. And I work on the international side of Save the Children's work. We operate food security and nutrition programs all around the world. Some of our largest prime awards are on the African continent and in South Asia. And from the advocacy perspective, we work really closely with Congress and the administration to push for really effective programs that reach the most vulnerable. I'm really happy to be with you all and delighted to join the Alliance. Much.
Thanks so much, Mary and Cassidy, and welcome to you both. Next, I'd like to turn it over to Jesse Marsh, who is the Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships at Food Rescue Hero, which is an organization that has just joined under our startup category.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having us and welcoming us. Food Rescue Hero is a technology platform that enables food recovery and hunger relief organizations to launch and scale food rescue. As you probably know, 40% of the food we produce gets wasted. And I know that I don't have to tell everyone in this group that food insecurity has increased dramatically during COVID. So a significant percentage of the food waste that occurs happens at the retail level with grocery stores and restaurants. And there are lots of food rescue organizations that rescue fresh surplus food from retailers, but recovering it is tricky because the quantities and frequency are unpredictable. So Food Rescue Hero technology addresses the challenge of retail food recovery. And we power food rescue organizations in 12 cities across North America. The way it works is that volunteers download the Food Rescue Hero app and are alerted when surplus food is available nearby to be picked up and then delivered to a nonprofit that serves people who are facing food insecurity. So since our launch in 2016, over 20,000 people coast to coast have downloaded our app. We have our amazing partner organizations that are food rescues across the US and Canada as part of our network. And together, they have rescued over 45 million pounds of perfectly good food, providing over 37.5 million meals. Food Rescue Hero was started in Pittsburgh, and we are measurably impacting food insecurity with our partners across 12 US and Canadian cities.
Thanks so much, Jesse. We're so glad to have you on board. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce Pradeep Kandimala, who is representing Sahave. He's the founder of Sahave, which has also joined under our startup membership.
Thank you, Denali. First of all, I want to congratulate everyone here. We have passed, today is the first anniversary of COVID-19 pandemic announcement. So it's good to see all happy smiles here, and peace to the people who have sacrificed, right? So we'll survive through this. And coming to our Sahave platform, what we have seen challenging with the food supply distribution by restaurants, mainly business owners have a challenge with distribution of wastage of food unless it is sold at the counter. So we have a patent pending solution which will allow them to be part of the social responsibility and have hunger person walk into their restaurants and use our kindness currency in our platform to make a purchase on hot food from the restaurant. So it will solve the business problem to be compliant with the food and security, and also allows our community to grab nutritious hot food. Thank you, Denali and Eric, for giving this opportunity.
Thank you, Pradeep, and thank you to all of our new members. We're so excited to welcome you all on board and look forward to getting you engaged and introducing you to other members of the Alliance as soon as possible. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Eric. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Danielle, and thank you, everyone. I'm excited with having National WIC Association, Save the Children, Mazone, Food Rescue Hero, and Sahave to join the ranks of the Alliance, and we look forward to working with you all as we continue to raise the conversation about what it will take to end hunger here in the U.S. and around the world. I now have the pleasure to turn it over to my colleague, Minerva Delgado, many of you all know, who's our Director of Coalitions and Advocacy, to introduce our first panel. I want to remind you all that during these panels, if you could, please keep yourself muted with your video off. That way the panelists will be on the top of your screen. And if you have any questions during the Q&A, to type them in the chat box, and we will be able to go through them during the Q&A portion. So I will now turn over to Minerva.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it so much, and so good to see everyone at the meeting. Just a little programming notes. We are going to be joined by Congressman Jim McGovern. We're not exactly sure when, so we're going to start this panel, and when he joins us, we will pause and hear his remarks, and then come back to the panel. So I just beg your indulgence while we, deal with a slight change in the schedule. So I am Minerva Delgado. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you, of course. And I do want to take a moment to introduce two of our new team members who are working on the domestic front with us before we get into the panel. And that's Allison Maurice. Allison, if you want to wave to the folks. Allison started on March 1st as our domestic policy associate. This is a new position which will add capacity to our domestic advocacy work. And I'd also like to welcome Michelle McFarjam, who started yesterday as our Emerson Hunger Fellow, who's going to be working on equity issues with us. And we're really thrilled to have her with us from the Congressional Hunger Center. So welcome to both of them. So an important part of the focus of my work at the Alliance is staffing and facilitating the work of our advocacy committee. That advocacy committee is chaired by Monica Gonzalez, who you'll hear from in a minute, and Colin Christensen. Our legislative priority over the last year, no surprise, has been to ensure an adequate nutrition response to this really unprecedented hunger crisis brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. And so today, the first panel today will focus on domestic policy and what the nutrition response has been from the US government, as well as looking forward. And I've asked our three expert panelists to address the questions of, just what's in the American Rescue Plan, what can we look forward to, and how can we as Alliance members and allies help out. And so our panelists who are going to give a few minutes of prepared remarks, and then we'll take questions from the audience. So please put your questions in the chat. Our panelists are Brian, who's already introduced himself, but he's the Senior Public Policy Counsel at National WIC Association, as well as Monica Gonzalez, who's Director of Federal Government Relations at Share Our Strength, and Erica Kelly, Chief Membership and Advocacy Officer at Meals on Wheels America. So with no further ado, I will turn it over to Brian for his remarks.
Thank you, Minerva. And so as I alluded to at the start of the call, this is really an inflection moment for, I think, all of the nutrition programs generally. The COVID-19 crisis has really forced us to rethink how we're delivering our services, how we're reaching families, and whether the benefits are sufficient to do that. And those questions will manifest themselves in different ways across programs. And I don't presume to speak for my co-panelists, but certainly I do think that it's going to have a pretty significant impact in the early childhood space. So at National WIC Association, we of course advocate for the WIC program, which stands for the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children. We provide direct nutrition assistance to pregnant and postpartum women, infants, and children up to age 5. That includes a monthly financial benefit, similar but slightly different from SNAP in that families receive generally an EBT card with about $38 per month in benefits. And those foods are prescribed to be healthy foods. So as I mentioned, fruits, vegetables, and whole grains, but also a number of other products, including milk, eggs, cheese, and so on. WIC provides breastfeeding support and is a breastfeeding promotion program, but as many of you may understand and know, not everyone can breastfeed, and so we do provide infant formula for the families that need it as well. Built into WIC services is the clinical component. We also provide nutrition education as a requirement of the program and have regular nutrition education touch points with our participants. We do health screenings as well at clinics. So that includes measuring height, weight, and growth, both for our pregnant moms, but also for infants and children as they're growing. And we have a rigorous iron screening protocol, particularly to detect anemia. And in addition to the health screenings, we provide a host of counseling services and referrals, including access to healthcare and a wide range of additional referrals to social services as well. So with all of that being said, WIC has a very strong record of improving pregnancy and birth outcomes, improving childhood nutrition outcomes, both access to food, reducing food insecurity, but also addressing larger issues such as childhood obesity as well. As you may imagine, these in-person clinical services and in-person requirements proved incredibly challenging during COVID-19, with a requirement to distance socially and protect ourselves from infection from the disease. And so as we were thinking through in those initial weeks, we hit a number of roadblocks because the rules in WIC are quite prescriptive, both in statute and in regulation. And so in the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which passed just over a year ago in March 2020, there was waiver authority, which was established for a number of the child nutrition programs. And Monica will likely speak to its effect on the school-age kids. But for WIC, it was pretty transformative because it was the first time we were able to relax a number of these restrictions that have inhibited access to the program. And so pretty quickly in the late weeks of March and early April, states were able to scale up telehealth services that not only allowed for continuation of that nutrition education support, but also allowed families to onboard to WIC remotely for the first time in history. And so that was a pretty transformative change. And we saw that the states that were able to operationalize remote services saw pretty significant increases in participation. as high as 20% in North Carolina since the beginning of the pandemic. Some states that had to maintain some element of in-person services because of state policy or because of technical challenges continued to see declines and saw that families were not comfortable coming in. And that split is so clear and so pronounced that it just builds the case for continuing these flexibilities after the COVID-19 crisis. We know that pregnant women and parents of young children have a lot of stressors in their lives, and getting to the grocery store, getting to a clinic can be a challenge. So creating these convenient opportunities to plug people into the program to ease access is going to be really critical to building the next generation of WIC services. So the waivers were really the first consistent piece that happened during COVID-19, but one of the challenges is that the WIC benefit remains a fairly small benefit. And we're talking about, providing targeted assistance to pregnant women and young kids, and particularly making sure that we have greater access to nutritious foods. So before I tell you about our exciting steps to move forward all of those priorities, both through the COVID package and in the future, I'm going to turn things back to Minerva because we've got a very exciting partner and ally who will take the stage.
Thank you so much, Brian. And I promise we will complete your time when you come back. I'll turn it back over to Eric.
Sure. It is my pleasure to introduce Congressman Jim McGovern. Congressman McGovern represents the 2nd Congressional District of Massachusetts and chairs the powerful House Rules Committee and is a member of the House Agriculture Subcommittee on Nutrition, Oversight, and the Department Operations. He's a longtime champion for people struggling with hunger, as well as a longtime friend of the Alliance. Congressman McGovern, thank you for joining us today and look forward to hearing your remarks. Are we there? We're still going to go, Minerva, if you go ahead, you guys can finish your talk. We're still trying to ensure that Mr. McGovern can log on. Minerva, go ahead and continue.
Okay, thank you for that. So Brian, I apologize for the interruption. So I know you have 5 more minutes left on your time. Why don't we pick up here? Thank you.
Great, thank you, everyone. So I think that the lessons that we've learned during COVID-19 really set the stage for what the American Rescue Plan has put in place and where we can go from the American Rescue Plan in 2021. So included in the American Rescue Plan, which the president is due to sign any minute right now, very exciting moment to be together, but it is 2 distinct pots of money for the WIC program. The first is recognizing that the value of the benefit is not sufficient. There's an effort to increase the fruit and vegetable voucher. So drawing on scientific recommendations from the national academies, Congress has decided to more than triple the benefit of the fruit and vegetable voucher for WIC families for a period of 4 months. Now, like across all of the other nutrition programs, we know that this flexibility should be extended in the future, certainly through the pandemic, but that additional value for nutrition assistance is going to be a critical step towards building a stronger safety net moving forward as well. So that is a key opportunity to both resolve the challenges that agriculture is facing, but most importantly, to put more nutritious foods in the hands of families. The second piece is a pot of nearly $400 million that will go towards outreach and innovation efforts directed by USDA. And this is really critical because we know that WIC is still not reaching every eligible individual. Before the pandemic, only 51% of eligible individuals were connected with WIC services. And we know that some states have increased their outreach during the pandemic, but some states have not been able to do so. So finding ways to connect families to WIC services, to make it easier for families to apply either online or through phone, to get all of those systems built up, and to connect WIC even further with healthcare, particularly to make sure that that health information is being shared between WIC clinics and physician offices, so that we're reducing duplicative tests, but also making sure that if a pediatrician designates someone as eligible for WIC, that information is confirmed and in the WIC system, so that we're good to go and to get benefits to folks as quickly as possible. Another pretty significant challenge through COVID-19 that was actually addressed a bit in the December COVID package is the challenge around the shopping experience. So SNAP has scaled up online purchasing options through their pilot program during COVID-19, which was a very important step for reducing in-person shopping and really moving the program forward. But that work had not been done in WIC before. And so we're starting from scratch. And so USDA is doing a number of initiatives right now to get the ball rolling on those projects. And this is something we've made clear to the new leadership at USDA, that within the next 4 years, they can scale up online purchasing for WIC families as well. And so this is a very exciting area where there's a lot of opportunity to grow and to make some progress for both the program and for the families that use it. And so as we look at opportunities after the American Rescue Plan, I'm going to touch on just two big kind of large scale activities that the Alliance will certainly be engaged in, and we hope that each of you individually will be engaged in as well. The first is child nutrition reauthorization. So we've had a lot of false starts over the last 10 years on child nutrition reauthorization, but it is our hope to get it over the finish line this year and to make the necessary statutory improvements and changes that will help build a future model for WIC services. So removing all of those difficult statutory barriers that are currently being waived by USDA and creating a permanent structure that will enable telehealth services and that will enable greater flexibilities and options for families is a really critical step forward. There are a host of other ideas and provisions that we have in our child nutrition reauthorization agenda as well. Most primarily a small expansion of the eligibility that would address the 5-year-olds who age off the program but aren't yet eligible for school meals, and extend postpartum eligibility as well to ensure that we're doing more in the interpregnancy interval to improve adult health and nutrition. And then the second big priority as well is that USDA will hopefully look at the food package and consider an opportunity to increase the overall value of the WIC benefit permanently. And that's something that USDA can move forward and should be done in consultation with science, drawing on the dietary guidelines for Americans. And it's a very exciting opportunity for us to think quite strategically about how we can ensure that families have more access to food, more access to nutritious food, even when the emergency increases phase out at the end of the pandemic. So we will, of course, keep the Alliance keyed into all of these exciting opportunities, and we hope that you all find your own WIC voices over the next couple months and plug into these processes and lift up all of the opportunities that can help build a stronger WIC in the next decade.
Thank you so much, Brian. And remember, please place any questions for Brian in the chat. We will get to questions at the end of all of our panelists. So next, I'd like to turn to Monica Gonzalez, the Chair of Strength. With the understanding that we're still waiting for Chairman McGovern, but we will plow ahead, until that moment. Monica?
Great. Thank you, Minerva. And I'll just consider it an honor to be interrupted for Chairman McGovern. So thanks for that heads up. First, I just kind of want to build on what Brian said with respect to how we think about nutrition and hunger, that, this is really looking at it and really, from a continuum that, we're thinking about children 0 to 5, to have that healthy start, and then kids in those critical development years. And then as we think about our colleagues at Meals and Wheels, seniors who have really been hit hard by this pandemic, but also the many, number of grandparents who are actually raising children during this time, or providing a level of support as parents are trying to figure out how to work during this particular time. So I think, bringing this well-rounded conversation is critically important. I think, just as Brian said before, that, there were so many challenges and everyone had to turn on a dime to figure out how we were going to make sure that children and families continue to have access to these critical federal nutrition programs. And so for all of us who are steeped in this, it was not just necessarily what we were pushing on the legislative front, but it was also about what we were thinking about from a regulatory aspect and how we were able to work with the previous administration and now the current administration to make sure that we were getting all the flexibilities and everything needed to ensure that children and families had access to the child nutrition programs. Let me kind of talk a little bit about what just has happened in this last month or two. Right now, we have a package that is going to be signed any minute, we hope, fingers crossed. So we're really excited about that. And in that package, with respect to SNAP, the increase is going to continue. The 15% increase is going to continue through September 30th. There is funding in there for online purchasing programs, critical for people who had to remain homebound. And we know that there's still, kinks that need to be worked out, but we know that we'll be able to do that. And then, of course, kind of looking at, our friends in Puerto Rico and America Samoa to make sure that there was funding to really help our friends who are in Puerto Rico and the territory. So I think that was, important. So there are really critical pieces there. I want to talk a little bit about pandemic EBT. We were really excited to see that pandemic EBT was extended and tied to the end of the public health emergency. Unlike SNAP, there isn't necessarily a specific date, so I think that was really helpful. We would have wanted SNAP to be tied to a specific economic indicator, stabilizer. That did not happen. But, I think as we continue to move forward and we see the need, I think the most recent census household, that was a mouthful, Census Household Pulse survey, still shows that 1 in 10 Americans continue to struggle to put food on their table in the last 7 days. So we're not seeing, this all of a sudden incredible upswing, but we're still seeing that there continues to be a tremendous need. And then I think most recently, from a regulatory standpoint, we just saw the recent announcement by USDA that extended the school nutrition waivers, that are specific to meal times, waiving of the non-congregate requirement, allowing parent and guardian pickup, to be able to be served. We're also seeing meal pattern flexibility. I think, as all of you know, and I think, we talk about the meals and making sure that, kids are able to access a meal. There's a whole lot of work that really went into making sure that this could happen in a grab and go kind of way. And we were also seeing a disruption in the supply chain, what products were available to various school districts. And we're still seeing that rippling effect with respect to the supply chain. And, our hope is that with these current waivers for the summer meal program, that there will be more certainty that is brought forward. And then, of course, area eligibility was waived. And so that was really critical and important, to make sure that parents didn't have to go a long distance. As you might know, some parents, families who live in rural communities travel quite a distance to get to school, and that's through school buses, but not all school buses are running at this time. Some of them have been turned into mobile meal delivery vehicles, which is really terrific. So, but still for some parents, being able to access a meal was not always convenient, especially if that parent is an essential worker, if they live in a multi-generational household where someone has contracted COVID. So, you know, there were a lot of challenges and a lot of hurdles, and that's why PEBT was also critical. And, you know, from our perspective, when it comes to child nutrition, it's not one or the other, it's all of the above. We should put everything we have forward, all of our resources, all of our programs, and all of our assets to make sure that children are fed. We have seen in particular a disproportionate impact to Black and Latino children, as well as children who are living in with tribal communities. So we need to make sure that we're doing our best to meet the needs of all children and to meet them where they are, to make sure that they have access to nutrition. One thing I would also like to point out, and I think Brian touched on this, is that, you know, wherever there are challenges, there are opportunities and an opportunity for innovation. And that's what we have seen recently, is that, you know, we have seen where, you know, we are road testing things that we've put forward in previous child nutrition programs, a waiving of the non-congregate requirement, an opportunity to see more flexibility in the summer meal service program so that it can actually and equitably reach more children. As many of you know, the summer food service program and its more traditional structure prior to the pandemic only reached 18% of eligible children. And that's not actually even meeting 20% of kids. And so that's really work that we need to do. We need to do a better job of making sure that kids have equitable access to these meals during the summertime. So we're excited that we have road tested in some ways summer EBT through PEBT, that we have seen how well the non-congregate flexibility has allowed us to reach more kids. We have seen just in our own feedback an increase of almost 300% this last summer in reaching more children. So I think there's a lot to do there. So I think I'm going to close up by saying we hope to work with all of you to help push forward these opportunities and policy solutions that will better reach children in a more equitable way, and that you continue to work with us through the Alliance. I think the Alliance has done an amazing job of being a great convener and platform for all of us to organize and to be able to move these priorities forward. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica. I really appreciate your leadership of the Alliance Advocacy Committee. So a lot of the kudos in terms of the work that we do at the Alliance goes to you as well. So thank you for that. And I would like to turn now to Erica Kelly, who's our Chief Membership and Advocacy Officer at Meals on Wheels America. And as we stated before, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we will get to them. Erica, over to you.
Great, and I know the drill. Of course, interrupt me at any point. Like Monica said, it's an honor to be with you all today. Good afternoon, and really just want to thank the Alliance and Minerva for the invitation to speak with you all today, and just an opportunity to share a little bit more about Meals on Wheels and some of the additional legislative priorities and proposals that are being signed into law, no longer a proposal, I should say, being enacted. So really excited for that opportunity to speak with you. You know, it's hard to believe that it really is a year ago we sprung into action, and we're meeting, and so many on this call today, and you know, those across the country, we were really in communication on a nearly daily basis. And really, so while we know that we have so much work to do and to help to support hungry families and older adults, and here in the United States and around the globe, that we know our work is far from over, but I think that there is some celebration and some, you know, breath to take here in this moment, and just really honored to be with you all. Meals on Wheels America, we are longtime members of the Alliance, and we are a national leadership organization that is really representing and comprised of senior nutrition programs across the country. So while our name is Meals on Wheels, and you may be thinking home delivered meals, those that are delivered directly to an older adult's home who may have limited mobility, we also, many Meals on Wheels programs provide nutritious meals in congregate settings. So there was lots of synergies, I think, between the Child Nutrition Network that Brian and Monica were talking about, and the same could be said for older adults in the senior nutrition programs that exist. So like my colleagues, Meals on Wheels programs, either delivering meals to home or in group settings, practically overnight faced unprecedented surge in demand for their services. And, you know, we were all facing sheltering in place kind of orders there at the very beginning. Congregate programs had to completely rework their models of delivery, transforming into grab and go, or almost like a cafe, kind of curbside cafe is kind of a term that is sometimes used. We really just sprung into action to make sure that as many seniors as possible could be served. And programs saw, at the same time they were seeing surge in demand, some over 900% in terms of increase for meals. And on average, it was 79% of our programs reported that the demand for meals had at least doubled. And so since that time, you know, that has continued to sustain. They've also seen increases in food costs and the disruption in the supply chain, as Monica was talking about. A lot of volunteers that deliver, and a lot of volunteers who help deliver meals are older adults themselves. And so they too were staying at home, and local organizations were looking to, so not only were they seeing a surge in demand and needing to expand services and routes, but also needing to hire additional drivers to continue to meet that demand. So with that comes increased costs. So kind of all of that and more was the reason that we continued and knew that additional emergency funding was going to be required and necessary to try and serve as many older adults as possible, and to reduce senior hunger and isolation. I think that's another area of which Meals on Wheels programs are really familiar with. And the program itself, the federally supported program, is designed to serve both the nutritional needs of older adults, but also their social needs. And I think we've all experienced what isolation can do, and being, you know, homebound and alone, and we are social beings and need to be connected, and that's what Meals on Wheels is, and congregate sites too. It's a connection to your community, and that is what one of the core tenets of our services. And so, but again, we knew that federal funding needed to be a part of the solution. You know, as we've talked about already that charity or donations cannot make up the difference. And before the pandemic, this network of senior nutrition programs, 8 out of 10 older adults were not receiving the meals that they likely needed. So what we have seen is with the influx of federal funds, and so it was over $925 million that was provided for older Americans Act nutrition programs in previous packages. So that was CARES and Families First and the end of the year omnibus. And now with the American Rescue Plan, is an additional $750 million. But I see here we are joined by Congressman McGovern, so I'm going to pause my remarks and look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Erica. We'll turn it over to Eric.
Thank you. And Congressman, we kind of already did your introduction, so really I'm going to turn it over to you just to say that Congressman McGovern is a major champion on the Hill. He's a leading voice in fighting hunger on Capitol Hill. And we look forward to our continuing to work with him in his efforts to really elevate the issues of hunger even broader. So Congressman McGovern, I will turn it over to you.
Congressman, I believe you're on mute.
Okay, how's that? Better?
Yes.
Okay,
Perfect.
good. Let me just say, I want to express my appreciation to everyone who's in attendance at today's spring membership meeting. I'm a big fan of the Alliance to End Hunger. I appreciate all the incredibly positive, wonderful work that you all do. And specifically, I want to acknowledge Eric Mitchell and congratulate him on his recent appointment as executive director. And it's great to be with all of you on this kind of Hollywood Squares type of format. I'm realizing how I'm getting older. I was on a call with some students from Smith College and UMass Amherst, and I said, it's like being on Hollywood Squares. And they all looked at me like I was like from another planet. So they never saw Hollywood Squares, I guess. But anyway, but for the past 4 years, we have been playing on the defense when it comes to issues of hunger and food insecurity. And it's been frustrating for me. I know it's been frustrating for a lot of you because the need to do more has been obvious for a very, very long time. And we had spent an inordinate amount of time just doing body blocks from potential cuts here or potential cuts there. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, there were 38 million Americans, 12 million of whom are children who face food insecurity or who are hungry. In the past year, those numbers have climbed to a new level. Today, I think FRAC has numbers out that says over 50 million Americans, including 17 million children, are now food insecure. And that's unacceptable. But it also points to a reality that I think we have to keep on reminding people, and that is, this is not a new problem. This is not a new challenge. Hunger was a real big problem even before the pandemic. It's just gotten worse. We should have done more back then. We need to do more now. We need to work together to elevate these issues so that we, as one of the most powerful and wealthy countries in the history of the world, end hunger once and for all. I tell people all the time that hunger really is a political condition. We have money in this country. We have infrastructure. We have the food. But we have lacked the political will. And that's for a whole bunch of reasons. None of them are acceptable. But, if we can change that, I mean, we can be talking about not just managing hunger, but about solving it. And every one of you on this call knows that this is a solvable problem. There are some things we don't know how to fix or solve ultimately, but this is not one of them. The Biden-Harris administration, they have their work cut out for them. And I've already begun conversations with them about centering the issue of hunger, nutrition, and food insecurity. And I want to make sure it's one of their priorities, that they own this issue. that it's not just something that they talk about when they visit a food bank, or DC Central Kitchen, but it's something that they are committed to doing everything within their power to solving. We're off to a hopeful start. We boosted up SNAP benefits by 15%, which I think was a good thing. And the rescue package that we passed yesterday that the president will sign into law tomorrow, that'll continue through September. We ought now to be putting pressure on the powers that be in the House and Senate, in the White House, to make that permanent. The SNAP benefit hasn't been adequate for a long, long time. The average SNAP benefit is about $1.40 per person per meal. Can't even buy a cup of coffee for that. So we need to make this permanent. This morning we had an agriculture committee, full committee hearing about the state of food insecurity in America. And in the hearing, I spoke about the importance of working collaboratively with our food banks, our nonprofits, our faith-based organizations, our food producers, our state and local leaders, and others to end hunger. We should be highlighting best practices. We should be coordinating more with people and groups like those who are here today. And the beauty of the discussions that we had is that they show that we should be using the next 2 years to look at the issue of hunger and food insecurity from a wide range of perspectives. Each and every one of you here today is an important part of that conversation. But the question is okay, what do we do now? Well, we need to do more. We need to not just talk the talk, but we need to walk the walk. I said today at the hearing that I've yet to meet a member of Congress who's pro-hunger, although their voting records oftentimes suggest otherwise, but everybody tells you that, oh, I'm with you, right? Well, we have to help provide the pressure so that they are indeed with us and provide the roadmap so they know what they're doing. We have, as a Democrat, I'm happy that we are in control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. Our majorities in the Congress are slim, so we have to be strategic and we have to understand what is possible and what we should move forward. But I think that there's great possibility here that we can accomplish a great thing, a great many things. We have an administration that's in place who has vowed to work on these issues in the coming years, and we ought to make sure that they do that. So I've asked them to appoint a hunger czar, or my friend Chef Jose Andres says there should be a food czar. I don't care what you call her or him, but the bottom line is we need somebody in the administration to coordinate policies aimed at alleviating and ending hunger in this country and promoting good nutrition. The challenge is that the programs that exist to deal with these issues fall into multiple agencies and multiple departments. And I've been around long enough to know that departments and agencies oftentimes have silo mentalities. You need somebody to coordinate and make things happen. The same thing in Congress. I suggested today at our hearing that the Agriculture Committee shouldn't be doing hearings on hunger alone. We ought to have the Ways and Means Committee join us. We ought to have the Education and Labor Committee join us. We ought to have the Veterans Committee join us because they all have a role to play in this. The second thing is I've asked the White House to agree to a White House conference on food, nutrition, and hunger. We haven't had one of those since 1969 when Richard Nixon was president. And when I go back and I read the history of that conference, it was a little bit all over the place, but most people agree that it resulted in some major policy initiatives that helped alleviate hunger in this country. We can learn from that conference, and we ought to do it again. We ought to get those on this call as part of that effort. We ought to get our business community, our healthcare community, our educational community, you name it. Everybody should be at the table who has any role in alleviating hunger. And I'm going to introduce legislation to basically, mandate that. And hopefully the administration will work with us along the way. But as we move toward passing that legislation, I'm going to use my position as the chairman of the Rules Committee to start doing a series of hearings and briefings with advocates all across the country to start building a record and start building a list of recommendations that could be the basis for a White House conference. Because what we do not want is a conference to say we all get together and had a nice chat. We want a conference that will result in concrete recommendations that will connect the dots, that will give us a holistic approach to dealing with this issue. And as I said, resolving hunger is not just limited to one industry. It's an agricultural issue. It's an economic issue. It's a justice issue, a jobs issue, a health issue. It's a knowledge issue. And we all ought to use this opportunity to help change the false narrative out there that somehow people want to be hungry or that people are lazy who are hungry, and remind the American people that the majority of people who can work, who right now are on SNAP, actually do work. And so if we're talking about ending hunger, it's more than just about upping benefits in SNAP or expanding our school nutrition programs. It's about making sure people can earn a livable wage who work, because that is a huge problem in this country. We need to establish a more truthful narrative, and we need to start thinking outside the box. Let me just say, kind of in conclusion, look, COVID-19 has exposed the frailty of our country's economic stability. And it has shined a light on the disparities that exist in this country. But the truth is that those disparities have always existed. And now is the time to come together and create solutions. I mean, food instability and its multiple harms to health, nutrition, and well-being are the result of poverty, economic injustice, and structural racism. What we need now is a sense of urgency to make sure that these issues are front and center. And I'm going to do all I can to make it happen. So, hunger and food instability can be resolved. And I look forward to working with all of you on centering these issues so that someday no person in this country, and ultimately no person in this world, goes hungry. So let's work together and let's end hunger now. So thank you.
Thank you, Congressman McGovern. We really appreciate your passionate words. And you look to the Alliance. We are a representation of the faith community, the anti-hunger community, other nonprofits, as well as corporate and academic sectors, who are all committed to creating the public and political will to end hunger. And we love to work with you in all the endeavors that you're working on, whether it's through the Rules Committee or in your efforts to lift up hunger and make it a priority with the administration. So please look to us and lean on us for anything that you need to get done.
I will. And I just want to say to you, these first couple of months in Congress have been challenging, to say the least. Insurrections and all kinds of other stuff, right? And, sometimes it's, you can get discouraged, but being on the call with all of you, is hopeful to me, because there are good people out there who are trying to make a difference, who are trying to make this country and this world a better place. And so I appreciate you being wind at my back. I'm going to be wind at your back. And I look forward to working with all of you in the weeks, months, and years ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. You have friends here. Thank you.
Be safe.
You too.
All right.
All right. Minerva, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much. What an inspirational break in our panel. And it's always a treat, a real treat to hear from such an amazing champion of our issue in Congress. So not to fear, we have plenty of time to wrap up and take questions. So please go ahead and put your questions in the chat. We will get to them. So Erica, I owe you 4 minutes, but then what I'd like to do is just kind of go back to Brian and just do a 2-minute recap, just to kind of get everyone centered back on our topic, particularly focused on what's next in your area of endeavor and how can we all assist in that. So Erica, you have the floor.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, that's, I'm feeling, again, really energized and to feel like the congressman that, being surrounded by all of you is continued motivation to keep going and to work as hard as we do. We have the money, we have the infrastructure, we have the food to solve these problems. So just excited and invigorated to continue on. So just to kind of summarize where I left off, I think a point for this whole group to know and understand for the population that Meals on Wheels programs are serving, older adults, once those older adults fall into poverty, it's much more challenging for them to climb out of it. And that home delivered meals or congregate meals, similar to what Monica said, that it's not in the program serving older adults and helping reduce hunger in our country. It's not an either or, but all of the above, so piggybacking off of Monica. And that's really how we look at that continuum of need for senior hunger as well, that you may lack mobility and be homebound. And so for you or for that individual, a home delivered meal plus grocery delivery and the commodity supplemental food program might be the best kind of direction and support system. But for someone else, it may be SNAP and the senior farmers market program. So really looking at it not as a one size fits all, but just to recap kind of what was in the rescue plan and that want you all to know about is that, the demand is not going away. Our membership agrees that those who have come on to the program are here to stay, meaning they are going to continue to need that help and support. So while we're very grateful to have $1.4 billion for the Older Americans Act program, that's the national legislation that really oversees services and supports for older adults. So while we're really pleased with that level of emergency funding and $750 million being specifically designated for nutrition, there's so much more to go. We have so much more to do. And so looking ahead, we're really focused on the appropriations process. And so that's an area of support that we would welcome this group to weave into their advocacy priorities and certain points throughout the year. Right now in March, it is March. March 22nd is actually our anniversary, 49 years of which the Older Americans Act nutrition program has been in place. So coming up on 50, I know that there will be additional ways that we can engage you all and to really help celebrate that milestone. There's also May is called Older Americans Month. So I think that there will be opportunities for advocacy and action and raising awareness about the needs of older adults and their families kind of at that time. So specifically related to our appropriations ask, we're asking for over $1 billion in the fiscal 2022 process. And so that represents $140 million increase or 15% from current levels. And so while we have the emergency funding in place to sustain, it's really, we have to get to that through this appropriations process and looking ahead into 2023, it's going to need to remain at those levels or more to really start to solve these problems. So I'll pause there and turn back to Minerva to lead us into Q&A or other final thoughts from Brian and Monica.
Thank you so much, Erica. So why don't we, Brian, why don't we go back just a 2-minute recap, really focused on what's coming at us and, how can we best get engaged?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the first thing coming at us after this is going to be, I think the president is going to move forward with another plan, the recovery plan, and we need to be very conscious of nutrition provisions there. Simultaneously with that, child nutrition reauthorization. This is going to be a process from Congress to reauthorize WIC, CACFP, which is for childcare, and the school meals and out-of-school programs. And so there's a lot of opportunity to advance improvements, such as getting rid of all of those statutory barriers, incorporating these flexibilities in a permanent way and making sure that we're addressing both access issues, but also the overall impact of these programs as well. And then from the WIC perspective as well, later in the year, to put on your radar is the USDA-led process to review the food package for WIC, which would allow the opportunity to enhance the overall WIC benefit. And so that's a later in the year process, an opportunity that will require significant public engagement. And so the Alliance hopefully will help shepherd a lot of you in that process to connect and comment and engage in that.
Thank you. And Brian, while we have you, there is a question from Shannon. What are your top legislative priorities for WIC to actually reach more eligible women and children? How would you like to see the menu of WIC approved foods continue to expand?
Excellent questions. So when it comes to legislative priorities, we're talking about child nutrition reauthorization. And so the key there is really going to be enacting those flexibilities, removing a lot of the in-person requirements, and finding ways to extend certification periods, all steps that can help simplify access to the program and make it a lot more coordinated and a lot easier for families to apply online, to front load a lot of the work online, and so that when there are in-person clinic opportunities, it's either in conjunction with a healthcare provider or something that's more accessible and aligned with the participant's schedule. So removing a lot of those barriers and enacting those waiver flexibilities in a permanent way is going to be a big step in removing the barriers to access and enabling higher participation rates. When we see the opportunity to increase the value of the WIC food package, which again is a USDA-led process, we want to make sure that's in touch with scientific advice. And so in 2017, the National Academies of Sciences came out with a report recommending significant increases in WIC's fruit and vegetable voucher. And that was the report and recommendation that really formed the basis of this 4-month bump that we're going to see as a result of the American Rescue Plan. And so making that change permanent, but recognizing it's not just going to be fruits and vegetables. Enhancing access to seafood for pregnant women, for example, is another opportunity that's highlighted in the report. And so there are going to be other opportunities to introduce either new food groups or expand on the food groups that are already available through WIC. But pretty much a significant increase in the fruit and vegetable voucher was the main recommendation coming out of 2017 and something we'd like to see moving forward.
Thank you so much, Brian. Monica, if you can do a 2-minute wrap up, and there was a specific question around summer EBT and if this is the moment to move forward, and if, you know, and what some of those barriers might be. But if you could give us your 2-minute wrap up of where we're going and how we should get engaged. Thank you.
Yeah, I think to build on what Brian said is that, you know, child nutrition authorization is where we're all, you know, refocusing our attention and keeping our fingers crossed that we can get this across the finish line. There's been a series of fits and starts and a lot of hope, but I think one of the things to keep in mind is that I think that this pandemic demonstrated that we can do a much better job of reaching children, and we need to, and that business as usual may not be the right answer after all of this. I think that this pandemic revealed so many inequities across the board, and that, you know, the way that these programs are structured, and I think I want to touch a little bit on what you know, Congressman McGovern said, and something that Brian also mentioned, is this idea and this narrative that these are people who don't want to work, or that they're lazy. And so these programs sometimes end up being designed in a way that are punitive and to create more barriers for the participants, and they don't center the experience of the participant or the families. And I think what we've all seen is that that structure did not serve us well during this pandemic, and that by removing these barriers, we're able to better serve, you know, people in the WIC program, as well as people, families in the child nutrition programs, in SNAP, and for older Americans. So I think, you know, yes, we're going to be very focused on child nutrition reauthorization, but I also want to call out some of the good work that some of our other colleagues are doing here on this call around nutrition and access, such as addressing military hunger and other ways that we need to better meet the needs of families and communities. I think, looking at the cultural needs of families with respect to halal meals and how we're thinking about addressing better nutrition and quality for these meals. So I think as we all focus our attention on child nutrition, I think it's important to recognize that some of our colleagues and friends on this call are leading the charge in some other areas that are also critically important, and that all of us can lend support to those efforts. And just because Share Our Strength has been so focused on school children, we are working side by side with our friends at WIC to make sure that we're giving kids a healthy start so that by the time they do enter school, they're ready to go. They're starting out, in the plus column versus the negative column. So, all of these programs work together. We need to make sure that grandparents have the food that they need and that they're not wondering whether or not they skip their meal to feed their child. So I think it's just critically important. So, all of us are working hard. And so I think all of us just need to work together so that we could all row in the same direction and move things across the finish line.
Minerva, you're on mute.
Forgot I was muted, sorry. Monica, thank you so much. Did you specifically want to address the question of summer EBT? And for those who may not be as familiar, why is summer EBT important?
I mean, summer EBT is about, filling in the gaps. If you live in a rural community, you live in a very big metropolitan area, your summer site, I saw something recently in New Orleans or Louisiana where the NAACP has sued in that state because the nearest meal site was across the Mississippi River, but there was no bridge to cross the Mississippi River to access that meal site. So, there are lots of areas where kids just do not have access. So we should not force parents or children to have to walk 5 miles to go get a meal. We should give them the dignity that they deserve to be able to provide them with an EBT card to go purchase food, just like I do for my child, so that they could have lunch and dinner that day. So I think, what we have seen with this pandemic and how well PEBT has helped to fill the gaps, I think that, we're in a good position to push this across the finish line.
Thank you so much about that. So Erica, we do have a question for you. We know that in addition to nutrition, Meals on Wheels programs have provided much needed social interaction, as you mentioned, in an incredibly difficult time for older Americans. Is there anything you've learned about your programming that was surprising throughout the crisis?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I would say another thing in which we are making some changes, and similar to Monica, and really evaluating what kind of programming and services that will likely stick around. I just wanted to share that we are also focused, one of our legislative priorities is on the implementation of the Older Americans Act. So it was actually reauthorized last year during the month of March. But a lot of that, the policies that were put in place were kind of put on hold as we were responding into the full-on pandemic mode. And so some of the provisions that are included in that are focused on socialization. And another piece of the Rescue Act, of the American Rescue Act, there's additional funding for what is called supportive services. And that helps with, there's $460 million in the bill to help with that. And that is everything from transportation and help getting rides to the doctor, as well as additional support for technology and funds that can be used to help with what we call friendly visiting calls. And so where local organizations set up it goes by a lot of different names, but phone pals. So volunteers or staff can call and check in on older adults in that way to help with socialization versus when that daily delivery isn't always an option, or in rural communities when daily delivery is more expensive and challenging for an array of issues. So I would say that we're definitely focused on how technology helps to support and reduce loneliness and isolation, other types of long-lasting programming around friendly visiting and phone calls, help with things like greeting cards, and really evaluating what works and what is tested to really improve health and quality of life as well. So we're undergoing that work through research efforts, through partnering with healthcare companies as well. We really think of it as both social and nutritional needs.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you to all of the panelists. I believe that's the end of our questions, and we're almost out of time. I want to thank you all for your expertise, for your work on the advocacy committee. The three of you, in addition to a number of other of our members, answered the call a year ago when we said we want to have daily briefings because what's going on, right? And we need to all be in constant communication and figure out what our priorities are. And so thank you to all of you and to everyone, all of our Alliance members that answered that call and hung in with us for a long time on the daily calls and turned into biweekly calls and eventually, but really, I think helped to solidify so much of what has transpired around the nutrition priorities in the last year. So thank you to all of you. And also just a call and a reminder to all of our Alliance members, if you want to join this brain trust of amazing advocates, please join our advocacy committee. That is open to all of the Alliance member organizations. Please email me directly and I will get you connected. So now back over to Eric. Thank you.
Thank you, Minerva, and thank you to our wonderful panel. We still have more to go. We're going to actually take a 15-minute break. We encourage you to do a little bit of networking at this time. So Nate will actually open up several breakout rooms. We're in the world of Zoom now, so we're going to set up several breakout rooms for you, and you'll see an option to join a breakout room at the bottom of your screen. If you would like to use this time to network, please choose any of those breakout rooms. These rooms are not topic specific or anything. We just want to give you an opportunity to connect with other members. We encourage you that we'll have about no more than 10 participants per breakout room, so that way we can spread the love. So if you see a very crowded one, go to the next one. But then at the end of that break, we will bring you back into session so that we'll have our second panel, which will focus on international nutrition equity. And so please stay put, and we will see you at around 2:25. No, I'm sorry, 2:40.
Hi, everyone. This is Minerva. For anyone who wants to join a breakout room but is having a little trouble, just please, you can unmute yourself and let me know. I'm happy to assign you to a breakout room for networking.
Hey, Minerva's Jihad. You can assign me somewhere.
Hi. Yes, happy to.
VIP behind the velvet rope room, please.
Of course, only the best for you, my friend. All right, do you see that?
Okay, welcome back, everybody. We're going to give a few more moments to let folks come back in, and then we'll start our second panel featuring a very powerful group. We'll talk about global nutrition. So give us a few more moments. All right, we are back. I'd like to now turn things over to Asma Latif. Many of you guys remember Asma. She's a familiar face with us. She's with the SDG2 Advocacy Hub, as well as continuing her work with the Alliance and Bread for the World. She will introduce our next panel. Once again, I want to remind you to please keep yourself muted with your video off during the panel, so that way the cameras will be focused on our panelists. And if you have any questions that arise during the conversation, please type them in the chat box, and these will be addressed during the Q&A session. I will now turn it over to Asma.
Great, thank you so much, Eric. And it's great to see at least John Coonrod is enjoying the sunshine out there. It's a lovely day in Washington. Thank you all very much for being here, and to the Alliance, Eric, Danielle, Minerva, Nate, and colleagues for inviting me to moderate this really timely focus on nutrition equity. This week, we celebrated International Women's Day on Monday, and also the launch of the Lancet series on maternal child nutrition that was updating its evidence and analysis on maternal child nutrition, which, as you know, has really been a driving force for much of the action and activity on nutrition over the last 12 years or so. And then, of course, this year is such a crucial year for nutrition because of the huge opportunities around the UN Food Systems Summit, the Nutrition for Growth Summit that will be hosted by the government of Japan at the end of the year, as well as the climate COP. So such a crucial year, and this week is such a perfect time to focus on the issue of equity and nutrition equity. So as we all know, poor diets are a leading cause of death and disease globally. All countries face some form of malnutrition. Most face more than one form. But the 2020 Global Nutrition Report really highlighted the huge disparities in nutrition outcomes, both between countries and within countries. And the last panel really focused on that set of issues here in the United States. Today, we'll really look at the global space. These disparities can really be seen across gender, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, education level, and geography. And they're rooted in systems of social exclusion and the structural barriers to accessing nutritious foods and the conditions that enable good nutrition. The voices of and perspectives and needs of the people who are socially excluded are often left out of the conversation. The Lancet series pointed to huge gaps still in data on women's health, on women's nutritional status. So we actually have huge knowledge gaps as well as we try and tackle these issues. The guiding principle, as you know, of the Sustainable Development Goals is to leave no one behind and to start with the furthest behind first. And SDG 2 is all about good food for all, ending hunger and all forms of malnutrition. So in order to get there, the Global Nutrition Report calls for equity-sensitive actions on nutrition. Today we have a terrific panel that can really dive into some of these issues. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. We'll have Jeanne d'Arc Niraj-Yambere, who's the Director of Nutrition Programs for Feed the Future's Rwanda, Feed the Future program in Rwanda, Hingaweze. She's with Cultivating New Frontiers in Agriculture. We also have Chase Sova. He's the Senior Director of Public Policy and Research at the World Food Program USA, WFP USA. And Maria Kasparian, who's the Executive Director of Edisia, a nonprofit based in Rhode Island, producing a range of fortified peanut-based, ready-to-use therapeutic foods that are really going to the people who are suffering life-threatening forms of malnutrition. So I will invite the panelists all to turn on their cameras so everybody can see them. Great. I'm not sure I see Jeanne d'Arc.
Hello.
Hi, there you are.
Yeah, apology, my camera is not working.
Okay, that's
So
fine.
I'm very sorry.
No worries at all. We look forward to hearing your voice. So actually, I'm going to pose two questions to all our panelists. So because of time, we'll just, I'll read out the questions now and then go panelist by panelist. We'll start with you, Jeanne. So the first question is really just if it would be great if you could tell us a little bit about your organization and specifically your work around nutrition equity. How do you define it and how do you work on it? And then the second question is really around these global moments this year, the Food Systems Summit, Nutrition for Growth. What are some concrete actions that you'd like policymakers to advance during these important conversations? What needs to happen at the country level and how does that inform these global discussions? So Jeanne, I'll start with you and then we'll go to Chase and then Maria.
Thank you very much. Greetings from Kigali. I'm Jeanne d'Arc Niraj-Yambere, Director of Nutrition Programs for Feed the Future Rwanda Hingaweze. Hingaweze activity is a 5-year USAID-funded initiative to sustainably increase smallholder farmers' income, improve nutrition status of Rwandan women and children, and increase the resilience of the agriculture and the food systems to the changing climate implemented by CNFA. As you may know, CNFA is a non-profit agriculture development organization that specializes in the design and implementation of sustainable enterprise-based agricultural and agribusiness initiatives. Our view is that nutrition equity means all people have equal ability and opportunity to grow and to consume health and affordable and cultural appropriate food. The COVID-19 pandemic has presented new challenges for our work in Rwanda. Lockdown and the travel restriction make it difficult for farmers and the crops to reach markets. Economic instability means families do not have access to affordable and healthy diets. At the same time, the pandemic makes our mandate to improve food security and nutrition more critical than ever. We are especially proud of our nutrition-sensitive agriculture work in Rwanda, Zimbabwe, Niger, and Burkina Faso. Today, I will focus on sharing our experience from Rwanda with you. This is the context that I know best. In our nutrition-sensitive agricultural and market systems program, we begin our work with a community by conducting assessment and understand key agricultural, market systems, and nutrition challenges in a particular context. To fight malnutrition, our nutrition-sensitive agriculture work helps smallholder farmers sustainably increase their yield, diversify production of nutrient-rich food, gain market access. We also work to enable women to earn more and have more control over resources. These approaches help increase household food production and help increase the availability and affordability of nutritious food at local markets. As we are all aware, experts recognize three main pathways to improve nutrition through agriculture: increased production, incomes, and gender equity. Hingaweze works through all three of these pathways in Rwanda. These activities are mutually reinforcing to improve food security. The top line summary of Feed the Future Hingaweze's approach can be captured in the phrase, produce more, sell more, in order to eat food better. The activity trains women to feed their kids nutritious meals from locally available food, support improved household financial management skills, enables farmers to learn good agriculture practices that increase their yield, engages families with saving groups. Our approach is to work with farmers to optimize not only nutritious crop production, but also ensure that the full cycle of food security from production to market access to knowledge of nutritious food preparation and consumption is achieved. Food security exists when all people at all times have physical and economical access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and the food preferences for an active and healthy life. This approach addresses the four pillars of food security: availability, accessibility, reutilization, and stability. On the Feed the Future Hingaweze activity in Rwanda, CNFA addresses the supply as well as the demand side. For supply, we are working with farmers to increase productivity of stable and nutritious crops. For demand, we encourage communities to increase consumption of nutritious food and improve food safety practices. I would like to share some examples of the work we do in support of food security and nutrition in Rwanda. Feed the Future Hingaweze's nutrition goals focus on women, children under the age of 2, and male household members. Our approach uses the gender action learning system, which engages men as allies in the household. We adapted the system to the Rwanda context to enable more than 200,000 households to challenge gender norms and improve equitable decision-making. Given the importance of nutrition within the first 1,000-day period, our nutrition-sensitive program specifically focuses on increasing access to and the consumption of nutritious food among women of reproductive age and children under the age of 2. Since program inception, more than 26,000 households have increased income for the purchase of nutritious food for women and children. Here, the question that arises, how do I advance nutrition equity? To advance nutrition equity, policymakers at the country level should partner with local organizations that help improve the livelihood and the nutrition of marginalized groups and implement policies that address the direct and underlying causes of malnutrition to improve enabling environment for nutrition equity. Feed the Future Hingawe's strong collaboration with local government is showcased in our work with district plans to eliminate malnutrition. This year, the government of Rwanda established targets for local governments and district mayors, we call it Imihigo in Kinyarwanda, to achieve nutrition goals for their communities. We work together with local government from the planning phase to ensure that our work is aligned. This means that our efforts magnify the impact of activities, avoid duplication efforts and the resources, and leverage a nutrition package for the beneficiaries. In Rwanda, CNFA recognized that poultry was the great opportunity to improve livelihood and nutrition. So far, we have supported poultry program with 142,550 chickens at the community level, so more than 8,000 households can raise 180,000 chickens as a way to increase the income and the household accessibility to eggs that are highly nutritious and the other poultry products. We initiated a sustainable model where the first group that received one-day chicken would grow them and then sell them to other small groups to earn income and purchase additional nutritious food they don't produce. This model builds an ecosystem with the community to improve nutrition and increase incomes in a sustainable way that continue beyond the initial poultry grant. Given the ongoing pandemic, the next question that arises, how do we future-proof for the next crisis? Feed the Future Hingaweze prepares farming communities to build resilience and prepare for the next crisis. We ensure that farmers don't only have knowledge of good agriculture practices, but also the tools to succeed. Examples of these tools include terraced farming with agroforestry trees to control water runoff, solar irrigation systems to protect against drought, suppliers for hand washing and the proper food safety, as well as improved seed varieties and rime for higher farm productivity. I hope this provides a flavor of our work in Rwanda, and I hope you heard me, my English. I'm happy to answer any question you may have on our work in Rwanda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was an absolutely terrific overview of such a comprehensive approach. And I love the idea of future-proofing for the next crisis. And you gave a really good recommendation around partnering with local organizations. So thank you for that. Chase, over to you. Please tell us a little bit about WFP USA and your work on nutrition equity and what you'd like to see come out of the big moments this year.
Sure. Well, thanks for the introduction, Asma. And I think you're exactly right in your framing of our remarks today in our conversation. This is such a critical year. So many incredible milestones and opportunities coming up over the next 12 months for us to take full advantage of. So I think at the top, happy belated International Women's Week to everybody here, or Women's Day. And today is International School Meals Day for those who are following that. So I think the timing of this conversation is spot on. My name is Shay Sova. I'm the Senior Director of Public Policy and Research at the World Food Program USA. In WFP USA, for those who don't know us, we're a nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. that supports the mission of the United Nations World Food Program here in the U.S. Market. We do that in a couple different ways. Some of it's private sector fundraising, support and brand and awareness across the United States, and then work up on Capitol Hill, which is predominantly what the part of the team that I work most closely with. I think most of you know the World Food Program in this call, big international humanitarian organization fighting hunger. WFP in the last year has reached about 115 million people in 80 different countries, serving about 15 billion meals. WFP's mandate is to work in some of the most difficult contexts. And so we tend to be responding to the most severe instances of hunger, really providing a safety net for people who don't otherwise have access to one. So this is a really massive operation. This year, the organization has identified about $15 billion in operational needs to the end of 2021. It's a record-setting year. It's a record-setting year for all of the wrong reasons. It's not news, I don't think, to this audience that the COVID-19 pandemic has made the poor poorer and the hungry hungrier. And this really just hasn't been a hunger crisis. It really has been at its core a nutrition crisis. And we can talk a little bit about what that means. But like any crisis, already vulnerable populations have been really disproportionately affected. And that especially includes women and children. But I want to take just a quick step back, Asma, if you allow me to, and just talk about the situation that we find ourselves in. I think we had good context setting in the early conversation about the domestic hunger situation. But where we are right now at the international level is pretty unprecedented, right? For the second time in 3 or 4 years, we're facing the prospect of 4 simultaneous looming famines. Right now, we're looking at pockets of famine in Yemen, Burkina Faso, South Sudan, and Nigeria. We have 34 million people right on their heels at IPC level 4 or above. So this is really a pretty remarkable situation. Organizations like WFP and WFP USA don't use the word famine lightly. It has considerable consequence. And the fact that we're calling out these 4 situations simultaneously it means we're in a very dire situation. You know, at the beginning of the pandemic, if you backed up and listened to WFP Executive Director David Beasley's comments to the Security Council in April of last year, he was calling out about 270 million people who could be facing those crisis levels of hunger by the end of the pandemic. We're approaching those levels today. I don't know that we're quite there yet, but I think what's so disconcerting is that, you know, the worst food security impacts from COVID-19 haven't been avoided at all. They've just been deferred into this year, right? So remittances are starting to dry up in a lot of places. Even as we're getting vaccinated here in the United States, COVID-19 cases and numbers are rising across the developing world, seeing hospitals overrun in hotspots like Malawi and Mozambique. And, you know, what we thought was a good news story in terms of food export restrictions in 2020 is starting to shift a little bit here. We're seeing food prices rise for 9 consecutive months, approaching levels we haven't seen since 2014. We are beginning, I think, as a community to fear protectionism in trade again as it relates to food. These food price spikes that we're experiencing right now are pretty considerable. Just reading some reports from WFP the last couple of days, the estimate right now is that to procure the same quantity of food that we did last year, about 3.5 million metric tons, we're going to require about $100 million additional dollars at current food prices. So these things really have an impact on the number of people served and the types of things that people are being served with. And in many conflict environments, which is really what is driving the bulk of hunger today, obviously exacerbated by COVID-19, but the cost of nutritious diets can be 4 to 7 times higher than the cost of someone just meeting their energy needs, through bulk commodities and grains. So, of course, these food price impacts are going to have very meaningful impacts for vulnerable populations. We've already, I think all of us know the numbers of new children under the age of 5 who are vulnerable to wasting because of COVID-19 and as a result of the pandemic. I don't think it's worth repeating them here, but let me just talk a little bit about what the World Food Program is now starting to do on the ground to support nutrition interventions among vulnerable populations. And I want to talk about women in particular. And I don't, Asma, I don't claim to speak on behalf of WFP for their formal definition of nutrition equity, but I think it's a good question. And let me tell you what it means to me. And I think Lauren Sadat had a quote the other day that was very good, and so I'm going to repeat it here. Women often eat last, they eat least, and they eat worse. So there's this paradox, of course, in global hunger where you've got women producing 70% of food in most developing nations, and yet they are 30% more likely to be suffering from food insecurity compared to men, especially in the places where WFP is working. So what we're doing in terms of programming and what WFP is doing on the ground, obviously women are a big part of the hunger problem and face disproportionate levels of hunger. So it shouldn't be a surprise to you that over 50%, about 55% of the people that WFP is serving are women and girls in any given year. And that support comes in a couple different ways. One is through the sort of bread and butter of WFP, and that's emergency assistance and specialized products. So in 2021, in the coming year, WFP's management plan is outlining support to about 20 million children and pregnant or nursing mothers with malnutrition prevention and treatment products. So that includes things like ready-to-use supplementary foods, micronutrient powders, and other things. The other half of this equation is, getting away from the commodity and specialized food products is the cash-based transfers program. Now, COVID-19 has absolutely fundamentally changed the face of hunger in a lot of places where WFP is working. I think for a very long time, we've always considered hunger as a predominantly rural problem. What we're seeing today is huge numbers of low-income people living in urban areas in low and middle-income countries disproportionately affected by these losses in wages. And so cash-based transfers has become a big part of what WFP does. It's approaching now $2 and $3 billion each year in our programming. And when women and girls receive these sort of cash-based transfer, they are far more likely than men to invest back into their family. The research that we have and the and background that we have on this is that women are likely to invest 90% back of that, 90% of those cash-based, especially unconditional transfers back into families compared to just 40 to 50% of men doing the same. So last year, WFP reached about 14.5 million women with cash-based transfers. It's allowing folks to shop with dignity. It's allowing them to increase diversity in what they're consuming. These programs are really important, I think are going to continue to grow in WFP's portfolio. And the last thing here, because it is School Meals Day, I wanted to just comment quickly on the School Meals Program. One thing that people don't really associate with WFP is, this sort of sizable role that we play in School Meals Program. And WFP is the single largest non-governmental provider of school meals in the world. And these meals are really incredibly important. It's very often the only meal that a child is going to receive for the day. They're really important outcomes for young girls in particular. It gets girls into school, it keeps them there. The educational outcomes, I think, are key, but it's also has really positive knock-on effects in reducing risk of child marriage and in some forms of gender-based violence. And so these school meal programs are really, really critical. The other thing I want to talk about is just briefly, Asma, is fortification. And what WFP has at the end of the day is a pretty massive procurement platform that allows us to influence the sorts of things that are being produced on the market and what is being demanded. And in 2019 and last year, 2 years ago now, WFP distributed about 400,000 metric tons of fortified foods through its procurement channels. And there's opportunities to grow there. I think 1% of rice globally is fortified. If the demand is there, if WFP can help provide that demand along with other buyers, we can drive up the percentage of those fortified products, I think. So those are a few comments I wanted to make in the framing side of things. And then I would say, Asma, on the how do we take advantage of the big moments that are coming up here throughout the end of the year, if you'll allow me briefly. I mean, I think the lowest hanging fruit right now in my mind especially as it relates to humanitarian exit strategies, is investments in the social protection space. We have been talking about this for years, but I think that COVID-19 has the opportunity to fundamentally change the social contract between people and their government, right? The sort of upscaling of social protections has been pretty dramatic throughout the last year. We've seen it here in the United States, SNAP and WIC programs, of course, which you've heard a lot about, the early part of this conversation, direct payments. There's even now a guaranteed income for people with children in the United States as a result of this package that was just signed by the president, in fact, while we were talking today. But social protection, I think, fits neatly into the Nutrition for Growth thematic area around malnutrition in fragile and conflict-affected contexts. It's something that we have been talking about scaling up for years, but I think have an incredible opportunity to do that now. Cash transfers in particular have almost doubled in the last year, or at least the coverage of them in meeting certain populations. But these are still one-off things in most places. And I think a lot of countries are going to have difficulty expanding on scaling up those efforts and sustaining them. So while we've spent probably $1 trillion on social protection collectively as a global community, in developing countries, it's closer to just $6 per capita on these programs over the last year. So there is some authority in the Farm Bill that was passed, the previous Farm Bill in 2018, that allows the Foreign Ag Service in FNS in particular to lend some technical expertise towards helping developing countries scale up social protection programs, some modeled after what we're using here in the United States. I think it might be time to fully deploy some of those authorities as just one thing. So I'll leave it there for now.
Great, thank you so much, Chase. There was so much in there, and building on some of the opportunities around food fortification. Your point about using procurement platforms as a way to shift, to create the demand for specific types of foods, and I think school meals, school feeding programs are also an interesting platform. And of course, social protection ties back in with John's future proofing for the next crisis. So that's great. Thank you very much for that. And Maria, over to you. Could you tell us a little bit about Adicia and your work in the nutrition equity space, and sort of what you hope will come out of this important year?
Sure. Thank you, Asma. And thank you, Jean and Chase, for setting me up so well. My name is Maria Kasparian, and I'm the executive director at Adicia. And we're a Rhode Island-based nonprofit organization with the mission to help treat and prevent malnutrition for the world's most vulnerable people. And usually that means young children 6 to 59 months, but also means very much pregnant and lactating women, people living with HIV/AIDS, and other vulnerable populations. So we work toward this mission in 4 main ways. I'll be brief. The first is through producing nutritional, ready-to-use foods, as Asma mentioned. So like ready-to-use therapeutic food, Plumpy Nut is a name some people may be familiar with, I imagine. Additionally, we're involved with ready-to-use research and development, production and distribution optimization of these types of programs. We are also involved with supporting ready-to-use manufacturers, ready-to-use food manufacturers in developing countries. And last but not least, we're involved with education and advocacy around both domestic and global nutrition through educational tours at our site in non-COVID times, virtual now, and through advocacy in Washington. So our vision is a world in which all people have access to the basic human right of food and nutrition. In other words, like in the framing of this panel, a world where there's nutrition equity for all. So what nutritional equity means to me, and I would say to Adicia, is a time where everyone has fair and appropriate access to healthful and nourishing food, irrespective of geographic location, age, gender, ethnicity, education, or personal wealth. So that said, I would say that Adicia works toward addressing nutrition equity in kind of 2 main buckets. And the first bucket, I would say, is reacting to the need and the inequity that already exists through more targeted treatment and targeted prevention. So we have to first acknowledge that this inequity is there, it exists, and we have to offer more to the most vulnerable, not less or not even the same as other populations, but more, because their needs are higher. They're starting at a further back place. So when we talk about vulnerable populations like young children, pregnant lactating moms, people living with HIV, AIDS, their needs are more than others. Their nutritional needs, their caloric needs. We have to acknowledge that standard foodstuffs that might be available locally or through food aid, so grains, oils, sugars, etc., those things alone are most often not enough to meet the nutritional needs of these more vulnerable populations. Therefore, one of the things that we're doing to help combat that with partners like World Food Program, like UNICEF, like many NGOs who distribute, but our part in that is to develop and distribute nutrition-specific products that are high in protein, high in fat, highly fortified with vitamins and minerals, such as Plumpy Nut, ready-to-use therapeutic food, and as well as complementary foods like Plumpy Doughs or Enough NutriButter that go along to complement other foods that are available. It's also, when we're thinking about equity, my head right away also went to distribution mechanisms. So Plumpy Nut, or ready-to-use therapeutic food, alone is not enough. The reason it was so revolutionary in increasing access was because it was that plus the protocol of CMAM. So community-based management of acute malnutrition is something that greatly increased nutritional equity in the realm of treatment of acute malnutrition. And it was so revolutionary because it took treatment away from in-hospital, inpatient care in hospitals down to the community clinic level that could be managed more through community health workers and nurses, local clinics, making it much easier for the people who needed the services to access them. I would say that COVID also, there were already steps being done. I'm sure people know the MUAC tape. There is work being done to further empower moms and families to be able to test their own children, to have to make less frequent trips to the clinics. And that, I would say, got accelerated by necessity under COVID circumstances, when it was clear that people couldn't go to the clinics as much and the moms needed to be more involved. Looking at it through a gender lens, which you also challenge us to do, there's definitely the angle of having more nutritionally specific products for pregnant and lactating women, and even before that for adolescent girls. So in our world, in the Adicea world, that means specific products for women like Plumpy Mum or Enough Mum. So looking at malnourished moms and having something available for them, as well as looking at like a prenatal vitamin type product that is in a smaller packet. Outside of Adicea, things like other types of fortification, micronutrient powders, iron tablets, things like that. And then thinking about adolescent girls, thank you, Chase, you talked about school feeding and the school nutrition really being an important angle on that too, to start girls earlier, not only to encourage girls to be able to stay in school, but to help them, nutritionally support them at a young age when they're likely already becoming anemic and likely already starting down kind of that negative spiral of poor nutrition, which then leads to lower birth outcomes and then leads to more malnutrition. So really trying to cap that out earlier by reaching girls earlier, whether that's through meals at schools, through take-home, or through take-home rations that can be delivered at schools. So that's all bucket one, kind of mostly product and program centric, and really focusing, giving more attention to what these vulnerable populations need. The second bucket that I'd like to touch on is what I'm referring to as a proactive approach from a more holistic perspective. So Adicea is part of a network called the Plumpy Field Network. Some of you may know these Plumpy products were first developed by a French company called Nutriset. Adicea is a licensee of that organization. There are also 10 other organizations who are licensees and manufacture these types of products, and they are located in Niger, Ethiopia, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, Madagascar, Sudan, India, Haiti, and Guinea. I think I got them all. And in almost all of these countries, these organizations are working directly with smallholder farmers in order to get their ingredients, their raw materials. And many of them are also working with women to do the processing at different aspects along the way. So there's this whole ripple effect of not only is there a technology transfer to be able to make these products closer or in the countries where they are needed, but also this ripple effect down, manufacture has a ripple effect because of the supply chain and the value chain that needs to feed it. And so it's a beautiful thing that it benefits both the manufacturer because they get a more reliable supply chain closer to home, and it also benefits the smallholder farmer and those involved along the supply chain. So there are several examples from the countries I listed, but one that I will highlight is in Sudan. So the plumpy nut manufacturer there is called Samil, and they're based in Khartoum, but they started a partner organization called Dar Foods based in Darfur because they wanted to be able to source all their peanuts from Sudan itself. So they made a big effort. They work with thousands of smallholder farmers in the Darfur region and provide technical support, provide training on aflatoxin and storage, do field testing on aflatoxin, and then also guarantee markets for these peanuts when they are good quality. So it's this good relationship where both benefit. And then there's a factory in Darfur that employs hundreds of women with the primary transformation process. So the sorting, the deshelling, and the roasting of these peanuts. And then these peanuts are then purchased by Samil, which is in Khartoum, where they're further processed to make plumpy nut, plumpy sup, which is then used for malnourished children in the country and region. So that's kind of I like that it's very holistic in that it is touching on treating and preventing malnutrition in multiple ways. All right, now, second part, if I have a few more minutes, Asma, you asked us to think about COVID and think about policy. There's so much to say here. The COVID reality really further highlighted what we already knew, that the most vulnerable people were the most disproportionately affected. In terms of specifically about wasting, which has been mentioned, an estimated 6 to 7 million more children under the age of 5 are feared to suffer from wasting now. That's a 14% increase from the 47 million that were estimated before. And this translates into more than 10,000 additional deaths per month, which is mostly in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. So, what do we do about this? Some concrete actions. One, we've been all applauding the American Rescue Plan, which should be applauded. And I also want to note there's some really good things in there too for international nutrition. So it includes $800 million for Food for Peace, Title II, as well as a little more than $3 billion for USAID to respond to COVID, which includes support to meet emergency food security needs. So that's big, that's huge, and that's really important because there's very specific needs that now this additional money can be used to help care. So recommendations below that, other things we can advocate for. To me, the first thing is more funding, which is specifically designated for nutrition sensitive and nutrition specific programs. So nutritional foods that can help prevent malnutrition in the first place, and then nutrition specific treatments for cases that already exist. That is both. More focus on maternal health and adolescent girls, and start, thinking about this cycle and making sure we realize how connected it is and that this starts at the school age level for girls. And third, being willing to pay more for better nutrition and better foods for the most disadvantaged, and also agreeing to pay more to buy nutritional foods locally and regionally when possible. Sometimes people think, oh, it'll be cheaper to buy them locally, but that's not always the case. But there's other positive externalities that we need to think about in terms of that. The last thing I'd like to call out, because it hasn't been mentioned and I'm newer to it too, but the 1,000 Days Advocacy Working Group, I know has been working on the Nourish the Future initiative, and some may be familiar with that. And I love this as well. So they're soon to present it to the Biden administration to push Biden to be the administration, to be the champion of nutrition, the way that the Bush administration was the champion of HIV/AIDS treatment with PEPFAR. So it is a proposal that details a 5-year plan for extra funding related to really targeted areas in nutrition, starting in certain 8 countries, I believe, and then kind of expanding out from there. A similar model to the way Feed the Future was set up. So that is something I just wanted to call out as a big initiative as well, and leave it there for more discussion. I think I'm excited to join you all in the upcoming, Food Systems Summit and Nutrition for Growth, and excited to have this momentum keep going, because it's a really important moment for nutrition and nutrition equity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. And it's so great to hear the concrete ways in which your Edicia is working, and then how you're leveraging your own impact by working with farmers on the ground and really supporting those value chains in country. There are a couple of questions in the chat. John Coonrod had a couple of questions, one for Jean and for Chase. John, do you want to ask your question?
Sure, thanks. Thanks so much. And thanks. This is like one of the best panels ever. I'm just thrilled that you all are here. So my question was from Jean was, I loved hearing about the comprehensive program in Rwanda. And my question was, has it had any national policy impact? That was my first question.
Sorry about that. Jean, do you want to answer that question?
Yes, I answered that question because.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, in the chat, we did the district plans to eliminate malnutrition functionality assessment, and we found that they were not functional. Then we reviewed them to include the large committees at the district level, and we included the food safety and the gender networks established at the community level.
Right.
And now the district plan are functional at the district level. And now, because of COVID, they are doing online meetings to coordinate the nutrition activities at the community level. Yes.
Great, thank you. And for Chase, I think John's question was around subnational.
Yeah, my question, I was really excited to run into a chief in Turkana in Kenya, who had been a kind of a perpetually food problem area, and they had worked with WFP to actually get some farmland and farming and build up the resilience. And I was just wondering, to what degree is WFP continuing to work with community level resilience to really kind of permanently solve some of these ongoing and recurring food emergency areas?
Yeah, John, I think you'll remember maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, an Earth Ring cousin had a very famous line at one of the last board meetings she had for the World Food Program. And she said, it's my mission to make sure that we're not saving the same life year in and year out. And that was a big part of WFP's shift towards resilience focus. And I think it manifests in programs like the integrated resilience programming across the Sahel. And that's a place where, the geographies are so great. And the places where you're working are so far from capitals that you are working inherently with regional and local governments. And so last time I was out there was right before the pandemic, and went out to Niger and was working, started with meetings in the capital in Niamey, but the bulk of our visit, of course, was in the Maradi region, where we met with chiefs and local tribal leaders and others, where WFP is coordinating the majority of that programming. That resilience work has a lot to do with land reclamation and reclaiming degraded lands. Of course, we all know the tremendous desertification issues that Sahelian communities are facing. And so WFP has been working a lot with the sort of half moon model and trying to rehabilitate by concentrating whatever rainfall is available and making better use of that. So those communities are really seeing pretty tremendous growth in both the food that they're able to produce out of those degraded lands, but also a reduction in conflict between herding communities and sedentary agricultural communities. And they share this kind of communal land. So I think that's probably the best example I can give you, John, but there's probably a whole bunch more where WFP is working locally, in every country, of course, where we've got local and regional partners.
Great, thanks.
Chase, I think there was another question for you from Dan.
Yeah, I see Dan was asking about where WFP is sourcing fortified food from. Dan, on the question of rice in particular, the fortified rice has been rolled into USDA's food basket. And so if you're a McGovern-Dole recipient and you're implementing those programs, chances are the rice that you're getting is fortified rice. And it's really pretty commonplace now, but that's really one of the only places, major providers of fortified rice. It's a tricky thing because to have a fortified rice system, most of your rice production and milling needs to be centralized in a country. And in a lot of places where WFP and others are working, milling happens at the household level in a lot of cases. And so it's pretty difficult to get your hands on those products in a lot of countries. So part of what WFP is doing is trying to build that capacity internally in a lot of places where we're working to be able to buy that rice in particular, locally. There's only probably a dozen countries that mandate rice fortification, whereas if you're looking at different products and grains, sometimes it's much higher, 90 or 100 countries who have wheat fortification programs, for example, or maize fortification. So those sorts of things are pretty limited in country and requires that central milling. So I could give you specific procurement information with a little bit of digging, but I can tell you the U.S. government is a big provider of it.
Great, thank you very much. We're running out of time, unfortunately. I think we could have gone on for quite a bit longer because this was just such a rich panel. But thank you all so much for taking the time to join us today. All the way from Rwanda to Rhode Island, and Chase, I don't know where you are, but it's time to go and join John out in the nice sunny weather in DC as well. So I'll turn it over to you, Eric.
Thanks so much, Ozma, and thank you to all our panelists for such a rich conversation. I really feel like we walked away having a true understanding of how nutrition equity helps to really empower women, smallholder farmers, help to improve capacity and economies for vulnerable communities. And so I want to thank all y'all for your insight and expertise. I would like to again turn it over to Danielle, who will introduce our needs and offers section for our Alliance members.
Thanks so much, Eric, and thank you again for a terrific panel. So at this point, we're going to be transitioning to our membership needs and offers session. For anybody who's come to our membership meetings before, they know that this is an opportunity for current Alliance members to share their top line needs, offers, or any announcements that they want to share with attendees. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask if you're a current Alliance member who has something to share, please raise the hand emoji, which you can do by if you go to the bottom of your Zoom screen and you click on the participants tab, you'll see the raise hand emoji at the bottom of that participants list. And I will call on members in the order that I see them. Okay, let's start with Max Finberg with Growing Hope Globally.
Thank you, Danielle. And I'm going to lower my hand like that. For those who don't remember, this needs and offerings section was proposed by Mike Dupy, the Vice President of Sustainability at Green Mountain Coffee, way back in the beginning of the Alliance, and I'm thrilled that it continues. So Max Finberg with the Alliance to End Hunger. And I am now with Growing Hope Globally, having been with the Alliance years ago. Two things. One, the offering that I would give to others, especially doing advocacy work, is that we work with a network of farmers and their congregations and communities throughout rural America, mostly in the Midwest, and of folks who care about international development, who care about nutrition, hunger, ag development, and food security. And if ever having a voice like that helps you in your work, would be happy to offer that. We've worked in partnership with the Alliance and with Bread for the World in times past in bringing some of those folks to DC. Maybe that gets to happen again at some point down the road, but that's the offering that I would have. The need is we are looking for farmers and food producers of all sorts. We're theologically grounded, but agnostic on whatever it is they're producing. Those folks with good hearts who might be interested in our unique model of growing projects, and we can plug them in from there. So growinghopeglobally.org, and would be happy to follow up on both the need as well as the offering that I just had. Thank you, Danielle.
Thanks so much, Max. And next I'll turn it over to John Coonrod with the Hunger Project.
Great, thanks so much, Danielle. I hope there aren't too many sirens and dogs in my background here. So I have both. Also, the Alliance is a member of the Movement for Community-Led Development, which you could have probably figured out from the questions I was asking. And we're having calls in really for the next 3 months, focusing a lot on the Food Systems Summit from really more than 1,500 community-based organizations in the from low-income countries who participate with us. So that's an invitation for anybody to join with us. My need is we're really doing a lot of outreach right now in Asia and in Europe. So if you have colleagues in Asia or Europe, I would love to be in touch with them to enlist their partnership in the work of the Movement for Community-Led Development. Thanks.
Thanks so much, John. And I'll turn it over now to Allison Reese with Super Bowl of Caring.
Hey, thanks, Danielle. I'm Allison, a newer member of the Alliance in the past year, I guess. Not too new anymore, but glad to be a part of this. And I've got a need. We have created a new application called the Tackle Hunger Map, where we are working not only to help support all food charities in the United States, and hopefully after we get that squared away, we can start working more internationally as well. But we are in need of getting as many food charities in this map as possible. We're working together with other groups like ourselves to try to build this open source database of all food charities. And that includes groups that are feeding people but are not specifically called a food pantry. So we're talking Refugee Services of Texas are in our map, schools are in our map, anyone who's feeding people. We need to get them in. You can go to our map at map.tacklehunger, so TACKLEHUNGER.org. And if you click on contact, you can actually add food charities. You can suggest them. But if you've got lists, if you have a way to help us to try to get as many in there as possible, we can. There is no such list that exists. And we right now have the best one so far with about 15,000 food charities on our way to the 100,000 that we need. So any help would be great. Thanks for the opportunity. And again, map.tacklehunger.org.
Thanks, Allison. That's great. And I see that Maria with Adizia is asking if you could include that in the chat. That would be great. And Minerva, I see that you included a note on the racial equity training that you do. Do you want to just share that briefly?
Oh, sure. Most of our member organizations are aware of this, but we do trainings on racial equity, the connections between hunger, poverty, and race. Particularly if you're interested in doing racial equity work within your organization, we can help guide you. So please just reach out to me, email me to set up a training or to talk through what might make the most sense for your organization. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And that is all of the hands that I've seen raised. So If nobody else has anything that you'd like to share, I will turn
I
it.
have a quick one.
Oh, yes.
My device isn't showing any of the buttons, so gotta raise my hand the old-fashioned way. I'm Chris with World Renew. I've been participating with the Washington Interfaith Staff Committee on Trade. Some of you may be familiar with this group. We're working with the same program that Oxfam and Public Citizen are working with to do advocacy, grasstops, and grassroots for a global vaccine, basically to release patents so that global manufacturers can manufacture using US technologies in their own countries to speed up production and distribution. So I'm just going to share a link here in the chat. My ask is that if you are interested, if your organization is interested at the organizational sign-on level or at the mobilizing grassroots support level, either level, you can contact me, or if you know others on the WISC trade working group, you can contact them as well. I'm not the expert on this, just doing my part to raise awareness and bring more organizations to the table. There's a lot going on with the vaccine and with hunger in the US and with hunger internationally as well. There's not a lot of movement and action going on with mobilizing for faster movement with the vaccine globally. So just raising awareness on that. And yeah, if you want more information or want to be connected to that interfaith working group on that, just go ahead and email me and I'll get you connected. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Chris. So with that, Eric, I think I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, thanks, Danielle. And I'm going to turn it back over again to Dave for one last time. But before I do that, I just want to thank everyone who participated today. I want to thank our wonderful panel, our panelists for educating us on issues that are important as it relates to hunger, both US and globally. I also want to thank Congressman McGovern for such a passionate, for his passionate remarks, and look forward to working with him. We're going to keep the line open for a few minutes after we adjourn, just in case anyone would like to finish up any conversations or networking, or if you have any questions for staff. So before I adjourn, we'll turn it over to Dave Miner for one last set of comments.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Yeah, great conversations. Wonderful to have everybody on. Just really excited about the momentum. We have a grand opportunity and to make a much bigger difference. And this was certainly an important part of that. So just a quick thanks to all the participants, and Eric, thanks to you and your team.
Thank you. Thank you for everybody. We will keep the line open. Meantime, we will